Well, hello, we are live. Welcome to Books and Bourbon, episode 7. I'm your host, Caleb Roth, and this over here is my
Is
co-host.
Dave or Dave can read?
Yes, I hope we all can read. Depends on how much we drink. Well, if you're not familiar, this is the show where we talk about books and bourbon, but we talk very little about bourbon and primarily about books and specifically how you can improve your book business. So David is a quite accomplished bulk bookseller out of Denver. I am a baby bulk seller, if you want to call it that. I pretty much run a consignment book business. I am located in northern Indiana, formerly in Colorado. I still miss it out there, but Indiana is now my home. So if you are watching, we see a bunch of comments coming in. Please let us know where you're watching from, as well as maybe what you were reading recently. I'm going to try. I might be a little distracted today. I am trying desperately to also run the tech for this. There we go. We'll make it a little cleaner on the back end. Matthew is our, what do we call Matthew? Kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, I'd say he's like the moderator or maybe because he did all the technical. Well, he does all the technical stuff for the weekly show.
Does he handles all of the behind the scenes things. So Matthew, we miss you. He is with his family on a little bit of a getaway right now, so they're enjoying. I'm not going to share. He's enjoying a very beautiful location, and we are excited to have him back next week. But glad he gets a little bit of time away. So I will be trying to manage this. So if we kind of screw some things up, bear with us. But this is episode 7. I think at some point this is a pretty good stretch. I don't know if I've ever done anything for 7 weeks in a row. I imagine if we continue to go on, maybe we'll get to episode 700 and you and I can be sitting smoking cigars and in rocking chairs on a front porch. That might be pretty interesting.
That'd be pretty cool.
So again, if you are tuning in, thanks for being here. Looks like we have 40 to 50 people. So tuning in on our Facebook group as well as on YouTube. Drop us a like, let us know where you're watching from, and we'll be doing some questions as well. So this will be a little bit different of a show. Not only is Matthew not here, we don't have a special guest today. So our special guests are yours truly. So we're excited to dig in. And as we talked about what to talk about and how to add value to your lives today, we came up with a couple ideas. So one, I'm going to get into a little bit of creative, what I call remote sourcing. I'll kind of share something I'm doing this weekend, actually. And by me, I mean, I'm outsourcing it. So that'll be cool. So creative remote sourcing. And then the rest of the time is primarily going to be dedicated to something we're going to call business therapy session, where David's actually come up with a whole list of questions. I think he just secretly wants to ask me these questions, but we'll be asking each other a series of questions, kind of like a SWOT analysis. So looking at some of our strengths and weaknesses, where the industry is going, some things that we're learning, and then we will close things down with a new section called Game Changer of the Week, and that's going to be where we share some tips. So make sure you stay till the end, and we'll share some things that we're learning in our own business. Well, before we jump into some of the remote sourcing and the business therapy session, David, what are you drinking today?
All right, today I've got a Negroni, which is 1 part sweet vermouth, 1 part Campari, of course, which is like an aperitif. And then I've got this Spring 44 gin, which is from Colorado, Loveland, Colorado. And so, and then finally, of course, zest of orange. I ran out of oranges, so I used lemon instead. And so I've got a, homemade Negroni.
Beautiful. Well, I don't know how to follow recipes, so I just have a straight bottle of. I was in Scotland last week. For those that watch, I have a bottle of Ardbeg Tenure. It's very delicious.
Man. Is that
Uh,
that's heavy on the peat, right?
it
That,
is. It's very smoky.
yeah.
So I think they call that peaty. Fun fact: they don't call it Scotch over there. It's just whiskey because we only call it Scotch when we import it.
Just
So
like you don't call French fries in France.
no, they're just crisps, probably chips, whatever. So again, if you do want to leave some comments or ask questions, do that. We'll raise a toast, say cheers, and we'll get this thing started.
I like your glass.
Thank you, George T. Stagg. I always think of when we brought you on the team. Actually, we got a bottle of Stagg Junior, Baby Stagg, and kind of celebrated that. So
That's buried up there somewhere for me.
it's beautiful. Adam says I win on the bourbon section, which is great. We got a couple trolls in here already, so we might need to address them. Not Alesa, you're great. She was our very first guest, actually. This guy, if I can find the comments, we might need to deal with. I don't know if we can boot him out. Matthew's not here to ask. Come on, come on. All right, Mr. Martlink is saying episode 6 was so much better. He's a little biased since he was on the show. He was drinking some Jack. But if you missed episode 6, check that out. Bill talks about kind of his start in the book world, what he's doing over at Sell Back Your Books, and more. Week 8, we've already got scheduled out. We're going to have somebody from Alaska joining and talking about how to run an Amazon business remotely. So that'll be a fun one as well. And if you've missed any of the earlier ones, you can, of course, go to our channel, our YouTube channel. If you're already there, make sure you subscribe. But you can check it out. You can just go to YouTube, not Google, and type in Books and Bourbon episode X 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're going to continue these going as well. So again, thanks for being here. We're glad that you're sharing some of your precious time with us. So now we move to a section of the show that we kind of talk about market updates. And we were talking in the pre-show. I don't think there's any major market updates. Any major things you wanted to share there, David? I know you were talking about a price increase on shipping.
Yeah. So Bill mentioned it last week too, and so the USPS announced an 8.5% increase. I believe this is across the board on all their products on July 10th, which is a Sunday. And so starting from that Monday, the new prices will be live. And so 8.5% increase. My hope is that the ASP, or the average sale price of books, goes up proportionately, but we'll see.
We will see. There tends to be about a month lag. I think the reason is people review their businesses monthly. And so they get to the end of the month and they go, I didn't make a whole lot of money. And so then they go back and analyze their pricing, repricers, etc. So for those of you that run software companies, looking at UnitoScan, they might be watching. Sometimes they do. Let your guests know, let your customers know that these things are happening, because not everybody's on Facebook. That's something obviously we're learning as well. So we'll be looking for those. There's a lot of inflation. I was looking at kind of consumer indexes in terms of how optimistic, or in this case, pessimistic. So what people worry about, and they kind of track two different metrics. One is inflation and one is gas prices. And which one do you think people are more concerned with right now, David?
Gas prices, probably.
It's actually inflation, which is a little counterintuitive. So it's interesting. I think people realize that gas is going up partly because of inflation. And so that's intriguing. Inflation, I think latest numbers are looking at like 7-ish to 8-ish% in the US. And so, of course, we're seeing grocery prices go up, gas prices go up, Amazon fees go up. Of course, gas is the one that hits us in the pocket. It's something that we see driving to and from work every day at all the gas stations. But that's interesting. So we'll continue to monitor the indexes there. Maybe if gas is too expensive and it costs too much to go drive places, people will just buy more stuff on e-commerce. So maybe that'll benefit us a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adam's saying it costs $150 to fill his truck. So yeah, that tends to be the case. Well, I've got a cool remote sourcing strategy, and I know, Dave, you're pretty good at monitoring worldwide, or at least the US market, and finding shelving, for example, or other things. And you're usually creative and willing to go fly places and get materials. I've got an interesting deal that kind of came my way. It was sort of a referral. I've got a couple different brand names out there that look for books, not just consignment, but looking for big deals. And I got a phone call. Actually, I might have shared this story a bit, the early stages of it. I got a phone call, I think, in February. So we're pushing 4 months now. And it was a gentleman, his father-in-law passed away, left a ton of like history books. So I think our episode 5 guest was Max. He does eBay and collectible and antiquarian books, I think he called them. But there's a lot of books of interest for him, but there's also a lot of just newer books with barcodes that are history, and they tend to hold their value. So as a category, history, religion tends to do pretty well. So these books are kind of what I would want normally. And he's located on the East Coast. I'm in Indiana, so it's a couple states over. And I say, well, hey, I'll just set you up with Scout IQ hidden mode. You can scan the books. If they turn green, I'll pay to ship them out to me. I'll pay you $2 a book or sell them on consignment. That's kind of how my consignment program works. Well, the gentleman, and I won't use his real name, but the gentleman, let's call him Bob, for lack of a better term. But Bob started scanning, and it actually looks really good. He scanned through, I think he said about 500 books. He set aside like 150. It was like a 30, 33, 35% hit rate, which is really, really solid. So he's setting these aside and he goes, hey, I live 2 hours away. I'm not able to go back very often. It's kind of an emotional subject because my mother-in-law is still alive, doesn't want to just part the collection out. She kind of wants all of them to get used. And so you always have a little bit of, I try and understand people, but I'm more money driven, right? I'm trying to run this as a business. But the people that are, selling the books or doing it on consignment, they want to make money a little bit, but typically they care more about other things. And so part of your job, and David, you do this better than most, is to understand what their wants and needs are and actually kind of tailor the conversation accordingly. So I knew that ideally they would just want all the books to be gone. They'd probably take a very low purchase price. It wasn't about the money. It was about making sure the books are repurposed. And the reality is, even at a 35% hit rate, which is really, really high for a full collection, that means 65% are going to get recycled. So in general, I don't want to pay to ship those books back to me, but my thought was, all right, I got to figure out a creative solution to get those books back to my warehouse. Because one, he's just scanning for Amazon. When I go back through them in my warehouse, I'm going to go through them for Amazon. I'm going to go through them for sell back your book. I'm going to go through them for Max with the collectible stuff. And so I can probably get the yield from 35% for just Amazon, probably up closer to 50 or 60% actually. So that's an intriguing opportunity. However, have you tried to fly anywhere recently, Dave?
Oh, it's so expensive right now.
It's insane. It's like $700 to go anywhere in the US. So, and yeah, we got people challenging our inflation numbers, saying it's more like 8 to 11 to 15%. So we'll see. But flying is pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. It is impressive that we can fly, but it's pretty pricey right now. And again, part of that's due to inflation. So for me to fly out there and try and remove all the books, 6,000 books, is a lot of effort. I'd have to rent a truck and probably drive back to Indiana or pay to pack them up. So in my head, I know I want these books. 35% accept rate is remarkable when it comes to just a solid collection. In general, I expect that to be closer to 15% for an unpicked selection like that. So, Dave, you don't know exactly what I did, I don't think. How would you solve this problem? If you want to try and get those books, what's the best way to go about it?
And it's several states over, you said?
Several states over. Let's call it 1,000 miles. So I'd have to, my first thought is I'll fly there, load them up myself, drive back. Well, that's going to take me several days. So what are their other options? Or plan B is, find somebody in our Facebook group that lives close and
Yeah,
sell the
so
deal to them.
that's what I typically do if I find a deal. But I mean, if it's 35% acceptance, I'm guessing these books are pretty good. I know what you did, and so I can't say, but what I'd probably maybe even do is like hire someone on TaskRabbit to buy a couple of Gaylords, a couple of pallets, drop them off in front of that person's house, have them just throw everything in, and then have a freight delivery from their place to my place. That's probably what I would do. All in, 1,000 miles. How many books?
They're guessing about 6,000.
That's really tough too, because from my experience, sometimes they'll say 6,000 and it'll actually be like 500, or at times they'll say 6,000 and it's closer to 50,000.
Yep.
And so if it truly was 6,000, I'm guessing my method would probably cost, I don't know, at least $1,500, maybe 1,700, maybe more with freight, because 6 pallets, 1,000 miles. I don't know. Let's just say 2,500, including the 3,000. Hopefully, your method was cheaper. I just didn't want to.
It's a little cheaper. So a couple of holes I'd poke in your story a bit.
Okay.
One, again, this person, the mother-in-law that is behind or still alive, she's a little bit older and she's a bit emotional because it reminds her of her husband, her late husband.
Yeah.
And these books were essentially his life work. That's what he collected. And so to throw Gaylords in the front yard and say, go ahead and just dump them in. One, she's older. She probably can't do it. So TaskRabbit people could, but they're going to be taking the books and dropping them into a Gaylord. And as you know, books get bent and beat up, and that's kind of a slap in the face. So, and then the second issue I would probably have there is what happens if it rains. So
Yeah. So
freight is very unreliable. And even if you scheduled it to be picked up later in the day, they're not going to be there. They're going to be there the next day. Now it's overnight. There's due, and but that was a thought that crossed my mind. So for those that are, again, business is really just how do you solve problems, and the better you get at problem solving and connecting dots, the better you get at usually putting money in your pocket. So what I did, I don't know if it's the right or the best opportunity, but again, it works. So I'm going to share what I'm doing. If you guys have other comments or other ideas, um, post those in the comments as well. But I want you guys to start thinking that there's other ways you can get at inventory. So I live in a small town in Indiana. I don't have the luxury of a lot of deals. That's why I choose to do consignment and work directly with sources. I did have a gentleman from, I used to go to church with him 10 years ago, back when I was 11, 12, 13, when I was in college. And he was getting rid of a collection of books. So I went over there and, picked up a couple boxes yesterday. So that does exist. Word of mouth is really big. But this allows me to source in other states and kind of go after bigger collections. So what I did eventually was, convinced him, said, hey, we're going to hire a moving company. They're going to come in, white glove treatment. And I picked a moving company because they're used to hopefully treating things with respect. So they're going to send a team in, they're going to box everything up, they're going to load them on their truck, and they'll get them out of your house. So that should take probably no more than half a day, probably 3-4 hours, depending on how the books are stored. And so all I did is Googled moving companies in that zip code. And it was interesting looking at their websites and trying to pick the best one. And I called the first two on the list. They just have the best reviews on Google. Said, hey, I've got a weird request. I want you to go pick up books, just books only, box them up, put them in a truck, bring them back to your facility. I don't have a second location to put them. So if you could you take the books that are in the boxes, put them on a pallet, or 5 or 6 or 8 pallets, and I will schedule freight to come pick them up from your facility. And what I ended up with the first two companies was a front desk person that didn't check any boxes, because it's not, well, where would you like them picked up from and where would you like them delivered to? I went with option C, which was, ooh, I don't know how to think through that. And so I ended up with two scenarios where the front desk clerk had no idea how to take the order, and said, let me go ask some questions. And they would literally play phone tag, walk over to the owner, ask them a question, come back. Yeah, I think we might be able to solve that. Then I'd ask another question, they'd drop it, and I was like, all right, can I just talk to the manager? And, in both cases, it was like, yeah, it's not really what we do. Well, the third one I called, and this is a great example of what you can do in your business, for those that are watching. The third one picked up the phone and goes, hey, it's Charles. Oh, hey, it's Charles with XYZ Movers. He paused. He's like, oh, that's my business number ringing. And so he answers, and I'm like, sweet, I'm talking to the owner. And I said, hey, Charles, I've got this opportunity. I'm a bookseller. I'm trying to get a collection of books. I need them shipped to me in Indiana. And so if you could build them on pallets, if you have space at your facility. I explained it. He's like, yeah, man, no problem. What else do you need? So just immediately, instead of going, hey, let me ask somebody else, he's like, yeah, we can do that. And I don't know if he's ever done it before, but he asked the right questions. He made it very, very obvious that he knew what he was doing. And so Charles earned my business. So it's going to cost me about $1,100 in labor and boxes and, gas to move from the place to his house. I'm guessing freight will probably cost another $1,000 to $1,500 to ship six to 8 pallets.
that sounds
So
super reasonable.
yeah. And again, on a normal collection, 6,000 books, if I didn't know what was in the collection, probably not paying $2,500 for 6,000 books. You're probably not making your money on that. But because we'd already done some of the initial research, we were able to kind of sort through it. One of the other things, if you guys are trying to do remote sourcing, is trying to estimate how many books are there. So the best thing you can do is get them to take photos of all the shelves. Like, just take a photo of the entire room, take some close-ups of the full shelves. And the reason you do that is, on average, a book takes up an inch per linear, or one book per linear inch, or 10 to 12 books per linear foot. Most bookshelves are 3 feet wide. And so you can kind of gauge that from the photo or ask them for clarification. And so every time you have a 3-foot shelf, it's roughly 36 books. All you do then is count if there's 6 shelves high. 6 times 36 gets you to 216 books per shelf. You can kind of do the math that way. And as long as the pictures are decently good, you can do that. So again, David's been there before. He's been in that rodeo. I've been in situations exactly where they say there's 500 books and there's 5,000, and you were ill prepared. Or on the other end of the equation, you bring in a 26-foot truck, and you could fit them in the back of your Corolla.
Yeah.
So it's important to ask questions, do your research. I had him scan a bunch of books, set aside the winners, and so we kind of know what we're getting into. And they'll get picked up Saturday. They'll get shipped to my warehouse. So for those that follow me on Instagram at the Book Flipper, I'm not as cool as Dave and put that as my name, but check me out on Instagram at the Book Flipper. I'll be sharing stories from that haul, sharing when they come in, and hopefully sharing some of the winners. And we'll see how we do. So anybody that is in that scenario has the opportunity to source remotely, get creative, check out a moving company, check out TaskRabbit, and see if you can't get books delivered to your front door or to your warehouse. And if you do, let us know, comment below, or drop us a line in the Facebook group and let us know what happens there.
Hey, Caleb.
Yeah.
So I kind of have like offshoot story from what you were just talking about. So for me, I've probably been using moving companies for the last like year and a half to help with certain projects. And the idea originally came to me when a mutual vendor of ours, they were wrapping up a really large book sale, and it was in the middle of COVID, and they called me on a Sunday night, and they were like, "Hey, no one showed up." So like
No.
they had like they were like, "We have 40,000 books left over." Just, I mean, that's an insane amount of books. And I knew with our truck it would take like 10 trips back and forth. And I went on to Craigslist, and I pretty much called 4 different moving companies. Like you said, like the first 3, they were just kind of like, no, I don't think we can do that. But the last person I called, they were like, yeah, I'm totally down to do that. My guys will be there. And they had a lift gate on their truck. And so they were able to load, 12 pallets per truck. Now, the only thing is they had a ton of like moving blankets and dollies and all this stuff in there. And so they couldn't fit quite as much. And also the other thing too is when we dropped off a pallet jack for the mover to use, that person had never used a pallet jack before.
Oh, no.
And so it took them maybe an hour to like figure out how to actually make it work. And then they were really slow using it. The only thing that I would say to watch out for is like, if you can try to lock in an hourly, like a fixed rate for the job, because if like in my case, I estimated that it would take at most 3-4 hours. It ended up taking a full day, like 9 hours. And so like I went from thinking I would spend maybe $200-$300 to, I was like handing the guy $900 at the end of the day, which really sucked. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, movers are great. And the nice thing is we operate our business during the week, and movers are often busiest during the weekend. So
Yeah, we were flexible. That was with the moving company. The homeowner didn't really care at that point when they came. So I just said, "Hey, when's the downtime for you?"
right, right.
We're not. It's not urgent. They don't have to be out by Thursday. There's no set date, which is nice. So hopefully that helps you guys. Be creative in where you're sourcing. Look for opportunities. Don't just say yes. Make sure you do your homework first. So understand what you're getting into, what the collection is like. I've been there. I've bought storage units full of books, and they pretty much were duds from other sellers. So that happens. That's because I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't kind of vet it out early. And then just be smart about what you're doing. I'm going to have probably $2,000, $2,500 into this when the dust settles, and that's before I even get $1 back. So I've hopefully done my homework. If I didn't and I'm out $2,500, the business can, absorb that. I won't like it. It won't be great, but it won't be the end of my business. So make sure you make good decisions with your money, with your investments, and don't be afraid to poke the tires and see what comes up, I guess. So that's it for some creative sourcing. We're going to kind of shift gears. Again, we don't have a guest today. We've had guests, I believe, all the other ones, although I think one was Yumi and Matthew. So we're going to try and maybe we'll do one of these sessions if it's helpful. You guys can let us know in the comments as well. If it's helpful, we'll do some kind of therapy sessions or kind of ask each other some questions. Otherwise, we'll continue to get into interviewing some of you and hearing your stories, which is always fun for us as well. So we're going to shift gears. I've got the questions up here, David. I don't know if you do in front of you as well.
I do.
So I've got those. We didn't spend a lot of time researching, so these will kind of be from the heart, off the cuff, so to speak. And David, I'll let you ask, I guess, and I'll try and answer a bit, and then we'll go back and forth and answer the questions. And so for this should be a little bit of an insight into how our minds work, how we view the market, how we view the industry. And for those that are watching, if you do have questions as well, feel free to drop those below or to the side or wherever they show up for you, and we'll try and answer some of your questions as well near the end of the show. So without further ado, therapy sessions. I should probably go lay down on a couch. And Dave, I'll let you start asking away.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Caleb, do you have can you recall a time where there was a pivotal moment in your business, either good or bad? And how did you and your business change from that?
Yeah, so a woodshed decision, a pivotal moment in the business that kind of made or broke me. I've got two. One is kind of when I was getting started. So I was going to thrift stores, going to library sales. I was working a full time job, and I remember actually going to Greg Murphy's warehouse. He's starting to put out content again. He's been off the grid for a bit, but he used to put on. They called them Bust Proof Live. It was kind of their own conference, kind of a precursor to Turn the Page. And I remember going to his warehouse, and that's the first time I'd seen a bulk warehouse. And I was super excited. My eyes were as big as saucers, and I wanted to see how the big guys get their books and what that business looks like. And I remember going into the warehouse and seeing all of the truckloads and all the Gaylords like triple stacked up on like half the warehouse. And then they brought him over. I think he had a conveyor or a bunch of tables at the time. And they'd go through them, and I'm like, "What's your yield? Like, what's your accept rate?" He's like, "Oh, we pull 15, maybe 20% tops, and we were discarding or recycling 80%." And I was getting tired of going to books. I love the adventure. I love meeting people, but going to books gets tiring, and going to thrift stores and going to estate sales and everything, you're always on the move. And the idea that books could come to you was like, that's really intriguing. I wonder how I could have that happen. Then I also saw the fact that 70 to 80% of the books were getting discarded, and I said, I wonder if I could figure out a way to get books to come to me, but only the books that I want. And that's where the consignment business idea came from. And my business is primarily today almost 100% consignment. So I've got people that essentially use Scout IQ on hidden mode. They scan the books for me, and not everybody's a client. A lot of sources say they don't want to do it. They want me to take all the books. That's fine. They're not a great candidate for me. And the ones that are willing to do it will scan them. Everything that turns green goes in a box. They send it to me. I either pay them up front or pay them on consignment as they sell. And that was kind of a big moment in my business where I kind of said, I want books to come to me. How can I get it to where only good books show up? And that began the case of kind of building hidden mode, releasing it. Everybody has access to that as well, and kind of building that out. So that's one of the moments. The other we could talk about, I want to hear what you have to say as well, but it would be COVID and switching to merchant fulfilled. I was 100% FBA. I love the fact that I could go to Utah, source a history collector's books, ship them all into Amazon, recycle the ones I didn't want, fly out, and leave no trace. It's like going camping in the woods. You pack in, you pack out, that's it. And I love that. I love the flexibility that it offered. And when COVID hit, Amazon said, no more FBA. We're prioritizing essential items only. So toilet paper and hand sanitizer and masks and all that is great. And groceries are great. Books, you're not very essential. And so we had to either just stop selling for a bit. We had no idea how long that would be, or switch to merchant fulfilled. And so we took our business. We figured out how to get some shelves up. I remember talking to you about how to organize everything. And that was kind of a make or break decision that said, hey, I still want to sell books. I still want to be in business, and I'm going to learn merchant fulfilled. And so now my business is probably 60-40 FBA merchant fulfilled. I do a fair amount of it. Nowhere near what you're doing, but that was a big moment where I said, hey, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to adapt and take whatever Jeff Bezos throws at me, whatever the economy throws at me. We're going to figure out how to continue selling books.
In 2020 and 2021, would you say overall COVID has generally been good for business, or has is it worse off than it was before?
That's a tough one. So let's get some data points in play, and then maybe listen to our stomachs as well, and just what our gut feel says. So e-commerce roughly doubled in 2020. So if you are selling online, it's fantastic. A lot of things were moving. Now books, a rising tide lifts all ships. So books definitely experience that groundswell as well. But I think people were more looking at buying groceries and toys and ways to not get out of their house, especially early on in COVID when we didn't know what was up. So in general, that was a really good boon for e-commerce. So I think our business was up. We've done fewer books. Part of my business was actually built around going after like libraries and schools and whatever else to go out of business. And so when COVID came, the government gave everybody money. I know many people here took what they call it.
PPP and EIDL.
Yeah, so the PPP money that was kind of built in. From a subscription standpoint, many of you canceled your subscriptions because you couldn't go look for books. So we saw our software business really take a major hit, and our book business actually kind of ramped up. So the PPP funds helped. Colleges took a lot of that as well, and so a ton of colleges that went out of business were no longer going out of business. So a big chunk of our sourcing dried up. And of course, a lot of our clients, like libraries and friends of the library groups, friends of the library is primarily, not always, but primarily older people. And they were extremely cautious. So they weren't taking donations. Their volunteers weren't in going through the material. So a lot of our supply slowed down. And of course, that caught up eventually. So I would say in general, it went up. We can get into the economics. I had an hour and a half
Well,
conversation with
well, I
an
mean, like
economics guy today, but
economics aside, like what about you mentioned that because of COVID, you made the switch to MF because
Mhm.
FBA was no longer an option. And you also mentioned for Scout IQ, the subscriptions went down because a lot of people couldn't go out scouting anymore. I guess sales aside, I think across the board for most everyone, if you were selling books in 2020, 2020 was a solid year. I haven't heard anyone saying 2020 was a horrible year.
Nope.
But for your business, it changed. I'm guessing it changed the dynamic of your business or how your business looks. Are you happy with that change, or do you wish that you could go back in time and business would be back to like 2019 and before, where you could just go in, ship everything to FBA? I mean, I guess you can do that now. Um,
That's a good question. I feel stronger having gone through it because our business now has two arms of revenue, not just FBA, but also merchant fulfilled. I also feel heavier. I love the freedom that small business affords you. And so when I run a business that's completely FBA, I don't have to be planted in one location and be able to go pick orders and manage a team and have a physical warehouse. So now that I have that, again, I think the business is stronger. If Amazon changes the restock limits again tomorrow, which they're starting to do in Canada again, but if they do that in the US and clamp down and say you can't send in FBA inventory, I'm not that concerned because I can also sell merchant fulfilled. So I feel like I have I think stronger is a good word, but also heavier because I've got a warehouse lease I have to pay now every month. I've got employees there that I care about and want to make sure that they are compensated fairly, that everything else. So the business is stronger, but I have more to manage, more to be there, and so that kind of gets me away from small and nimble, which is where I prefer to be.
cool. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, so you're on the bigger end of the spectrum. Did you actually lay anybody off? Did you cease operations for a couple weeks, or did you just kind of, figure out how to keep people coming in the building?
Yeah, for sure. Um, COVID was operationally and for the business, it was a blessing in disguise just because at that point in 2019, we went through this huge transition where we had a pretty homogenous supply where from one supplier, we were getting 95% of the inventory. And overnight it disappeared, it dried up, and at that point we were scrambling to survive the business. I was scrambling to survive. I was like, I need to figure something out, I need more books. And I'll be completely honest and say that I was really bad at like scouting for the first time and like trying to find suppliers like a lot of the people probably watching. It's like I did not have a lot of experience finding bulk supply. And so no or April 2019 is when my last shipment hit. I remember taking a video like, all right, this is the last load coming in. And then after that, We went from getting a load a day to 0 loads. And from April to January 2020, like the business was drying up and we were in a really, really tough spot. And we went from having over 20 employees down to 4 employees in February and March of 2020. And this is something that I've never shared with anyone, but in like February and March of 2020, when COVID was starting to become a thing and they were talking about lockdowns, I honestly thought that was it. That was the end. Fortunately, with COVID, all businesses suffered. And so with the government assistance, that was like the last lifeline that we had to like, all right, let's give it one more shot. That on top of running really lean. So like during COVID, it was just my family and me operating. And so it was just like 4, 5, 6 of us running the business. When it came time to come out of COVID, we got assistance from the government to pay all of our employees while they were at home getting paid time off. And then we also took out a loan from the Emergency Disaster Loan Relief Program or whatever. And that was kind of like a lifeline that extended the business. I really like ratcheted up our hiring. And so we went from having 4 employees down to 3 employees to like 16 employees all in 1 month. And from there, like every single day I went out and I was just on the phones, I was visiting places. And in 2020, I think we signed up like 30 new vendors. I signed up 30 new vendors because I was the one going out there like finding these new suppliers. And so COVID, I guess a long way to answer the question, like COVID actually benefited the business, not necessarily because, all the free government money or whatever, that definitely did help keep us afloat. But I think it was like kind of that lifeline that that I needed to really get my butt into gear and say, hey, you know what? I really need to like figure this out or we're not going to exist in a year.
I think when tough times show up, they force you to either just say, "Hey," like literally fight or flight mentality of, "Hey, that's been fun. It was easy for a bit. I had a good thing going. Cool. I'm gonna go, cancel it and go figure something else out. Peace out." Or you say, "Well, I've got overhead. I've got employees. I'm stubborn. I'm gonna make this work." And you just roll up your sleeves and get after it. And it looks
Yeah.
like you chose to fight.
Yeah.
So you've got some futuristic questions as well. Let's talk about 2021 and 2022. How do you feel? So 2020 was awesome. I think, like you said, everybody would agree that that was pretty solid for business. I think that momentum carried us into 2021 a bit, and now we're starting to see labor issues. There's not a lot of people in the workforce. Inflation, so the demand, and I'm getting, even my employees are starting to ask for raises and say, "Hey, it's costing me so much money to drive to the warehouse, just with gas prices." So what do you see with current state? And then I think you have some questions about the future. We'll get to those in just a second as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2020 was awesome for us. And it was really good because we're able to capture 2020 like COVID sales. Everyone was ordering online with pre-COVID expenses, right? Labor was still, it was moderate. Shipping was okay. Everything was okay. 2021, our sales were, I think we grew 20% from 2020 to 2021. So that's
Amazing.
significant.
Yeah.
Uh, but our overhead just skyrocketed. Our overhead, I mean, our expenses skyrocketed. The cost of labor went up almost double just because everything just got expensive. And so in 2021, we actually took a smaller net than in 2020, even though we had grown the top line by 20%. And then 2022, it's just kind of a continuation of that. It's like we're trending to be, significantly over 2021. Part of that might be inflation, who knows? But at the same time, our expenses are staying the same, like same percentage. So it's really challenging. I think right now what a lot of businesses are doing is just focusing less so on like growing the business and I guess bringing in the revenue. I mean, that's obviously important, but I think most of the people I talk to are just figuring out how to drive costs back down, whether it's making your operation more lean, trying to figure out better shipping alternatives, just getting really creative. We sort through a lot of books and we use big Gaylord boxes for them. Right now, I mean, during COVID, we were paying about $12 to $13 a box. We've resorted to using old meat boxes that still have like blood and guts on the bottom of them for recycling, of course, but those are half the price. And so we're just trying to figure out creative ways to cut costs. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're at. It's like business overall is growing, but so are our expenses. And so it's just trying to figure out how do you drive down your expenses. That's where we're at. How about you, Caleb?
I'll give a little caveat there because we see it. I play in a volleyball league, and it's outdoor. It's at a cool little like beach bar in the middle of Winona Lake, Indiana, which is unexpected. It feels more like something you would see in California. And we were kind of joking. Last week was our first week out there, or 2 weeks ago rather, before Scotland, and the prices are all up significantly on the menu. So we're looking at like tacos that used to be $9 are now like $14. And our first inclination is like, well, that's silly. Prices are getting out of control. And then you go, wait a minute. I'm sure their costs went up. The shipping to get their material went up. The labor is certainly going up. Everything's getting more expensive. So when you see that happening, when you see especially local businesses, I'm a big believer in shopping small, shopping local. Give them a little break because their costs are going up. They have to raise the prices as well. And there's two ways to kind of add to your bottom line. One is to raise top line and raise more revenue. So in your case, the COVID bump, you got 20% more sales. The other way is to cut costs. So you can raise revenue, which is great, or you can cut costs. Both of those trickle through to the bottom line as well. So I think that's important when times get tough. You got to cinch up the belt, so they say in the business world, and find ways to kind of trim where you can.
It's like the business version of going on a diet. You know what I mean? It's
It
just
is. Yep. And unlike diets, we joked about this books and bourbon series going 7 weeks now. I think that's longer than the average diet lasts. So we're doing well there.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You want me
You
to
got a
ask?
couple other, yeah, let's move on. So that's kind of the last couple of years and then kind of what we're doing right now. I think you
Yeah,
got some forward thinking questions, which will kind of be fun as we talk about therapy, so to speak.
yeah, absolutely. So, you're pretty ingrained into the book space. What do you see as the biggest threat to your business or the book industry in general?
Books in general, I think consolidation is going to happen in the book industry. We're already seeing it, and by that I mean the bigger players will continue to get bigger, and it'll make it a little more difficult for small players to be nimble. I think in any industry, there's always room for small players. If you're willing to hustle, if you're willing to out relationship the bigger players, you can always carve out a niche. But those big players, specifically Thrift, Discover, Better World Books, they're buying a lot of material right now. So I don't operate in the traditional sense that you do, but just as an industry, I see that I think power is going to go more and more to those players. They're trying to get sales to happen off of Amazon because they control more of the margin, and I think we're gonna continue to see that. So I think, and that may be short lived. I've heard rumors that one or two of those companies may be looking to exit and find other private equity to take them out. So they might just be buying up just to kind of juice numbers and make it look good. My business specifically, I'm not as dependent on the Gaylord and the bulk side of purchasing. But I think labor is definitely a piece. I've got a meeting with my warehouse manager tomorrow, and I know he's already talking about, hey, I've got to analyze some things. So I don't think he'll be resigning, but he may be. So I think just labor in general is going to be a challenge for me. In terms of sources, it's based on relationships. We do ship a lot of books in from other states. And as those costs continue to climb, that's just a part of my business that I don't really have a lot of impact in. And so I have to look at, does it make sense to continue supporting a client in, say, California that has to ship to Indiana? And that box of books might cost $22 to ship over here as opposed to $12 one state over. So I see rising costs continuing to hurt. Again, if the rising costs eventually bump the price of the books up in general, and we see that floor price start to climb, I think that kind of negates itself, but we haven't quite seen that just yet. So I think those are probably my two biggest concerns. I'm less concerned with the book industry as a whole as I am with just rising costs, some of the labor challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where would you? What's kind of the biggest thing that keeps you awake late at night?
Yeah, I guess for my business specifically, um, I'm just concerned about uh, the costs are going to rise. Everything's going up, and I have no control over that. Absolutely no control over that. But as far as the used book market goes, I think my biggest concern, the biggest threat for business, is people just not understanding their true cost of doing business. And specifically, I think a lot of Goodwills out there, because they make up a huge part of the used book market. I think a lot of the Goodwills out there are operating kind of with a break even mentality because they have a lot of other other areas of the business where they can use the proceeds to subsidize their e-commerce operations, or even just, maybe it's not even subsidize, that's a really strong word, but maybe even just like, maybe even, yeah, subsidize the just like figuring it out, like while they're trying to figure out what they're doing, they're able to use the proceeds from um, donations or retail stores. And so until until the floor price and the average price starts to trend up, I don't know, like I don't really see a lot of growth opportunity for the business, which in itself is a threat. um, as far as the book industry as a whole, I think overall my biggest concern is, will this industry really stand the test of time in 20, 30 years? But that's thinking way far out, and it's just speculation at this point. But I see uh, young children. I'm sure you've heard of this, Caleb. How many times have you heard, "Oh, you sell books? Oh my gosh, I love reading physical books. I don't know how people can do the ebooks thing. I love the feel of a tactile book." How many times have you heard that?
A lot.
A lot. Everyone says that. And the reason they say that is they grew up reading books, physical books. Well, are kids growing up today reading physical books? Some, yes, but arguably they're using more smartphones and iPads and tablets. And, when these kids today are 20, 30, 40 years old, they're not going to be nostalgic about physical books the same way we are. They're going to be like, "Oh, back in my age, we used to read on the iPad. We didn't have any of these VR things." They're going to be nostalgic about different things. And so, I wonder where the book industry is going to go as a whole in the future. But that being said, immediate threats, guys, we got to raise our prices. I in no way condone price fixing or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like,
Someone's gonna clip that thing you said.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's it for me. I don't want to say any more before I get into
Yeah.
trouble.
No, it was interesting. In Scotland, there was several used bookstores in some of the towns we went to, and they were quite heavily trafficked. I went in, bought some books for Elliot, and they were, at least one of them, maybe two that I saw, were actually expanding. So that idea of, again, especially as shipping gets more expensive, if it starts to cost, right now media mail is like 360-ish on the low end, 330, 350, somewhere in there. I know you can get it probably in the 250 range, but that's going to keep climbing up for everybody. And if that's the case with the floor price, and Amazon takes, $1.80 plus 15%, at some point you might see the floor price of a book on Amazon north of $6 or $7. And if that's the case, you're going to start seeing local businesses, if you can sell a book in a brick and mortar store for $5 and it's $2 cheaper than Amazon, you might actually see what everything used to go online. You might see that trend go away. So for a while, everybody used to move to the big cities, urbanization, and then now they're going back out into the suburbs, and that wave ebbs and flows like most things, like a pendulum. I wonder if that floor price actually gets too high, if people might actually start to look for more local used bookstores. And if you have that ability to be able to supply and source and serve a local community, maybe you're in a really good spot. We kind of talk about that as it's a lot of overhead, it's a lot of warehouse space, it's a lot of inability to move and pivot quickly if you have brick and mortar, but it might actually be a really good thing to have in the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I've got another one for you, Caleb.
Let's hear it.
Um, what do you see? It's the same question, but the opposite. What do you see as the biggest opportunity for your business and the book industry?
Man, book industry in general, I would have said, before kind of like the textbook type thing and schools closing down and getting books there. But between counterfeit books, we've kind of steered a little bit more away from textbooks. And just with the schools getting a lot of money, I don't think that's there. Opportunities, I really think it's cheesy, but it comes back down to relationships. I think where we're going to grow our consignment business is just networking and talking to people. And even in my small town, there's a retired college professor, and I knew him. I used to go to camp with him. He didn't realize I was back in town 2 years ago when I moved back. He threw away or gave to Goodwill, which is basically thrown away.
Oh,
Sorry if any Goodwill execs are watching this, but he discarded 20,000 books, and these were religious books, science books, like a whole mix. And I'm sure there was textbooks and classics and really good material. That probably had to have been $20,000 minimum of value thrown up, given to Goodwill. And I'm sure they figured out how to resell them, or local sellers kind of took advantage. Those exist in any town. My town's not big; it's 15,000 people. We do have a college here that helps, but I think the more that, and you and I talk about this, Matthew talks about it. How do we get upstream and get the books from somebody's house before they decide to donate them? And if you can build those relationships, if you can build those websites, or however you can reach that group of people and get those books before they show up, I think that's still the biggest opportunity out there. More and more Goodwills and thrift stores are figuring out e-commerce. They're selling online themselves. And so if you're going to cherry pick, you're not only competing with everybody that's got a smartphone, which is nearly everybody, you're also competing with sometimes the stores themselves. So I think if you want to build a book business or build any business, the more you can get away from the feeding trough where everybody else is and go upstream, I think that's still the best opportunity. So specifically for us in a consignment world, that just means pounding the pavement. We have, a number of clients already. Hopefully most of them are happy with us, and we can reach out to all of them and say, hey, we'll give you, here's a Starbucks gift card or something for your staff. We would love it. Love, love, love if you could take, think of 3 people that you work with or talk to on a regular basis, 3 other thrift stores or libraries or friends of the library group that would benefit from our services. And could you, drop them a note on our behalf? That's probably the best thing we could do with our time right now, is to get more books into the funnel. We've got overhead. We've got labor right now. Maybe it's gone tomorrow. I'll let you guys know. I think it'll stick around. We've got the systems in place. We've got merchant fulfilled shelves ready to go. So we can take more books. Our business can handle it. I think the best opportunity is for us to go find more books, and specifically through relationships, through the consignment relationships.
yeah. My answer is pretty much identical to yours. So I think it revolves around supply. I think you and I are at the point where, like, using an analogy, we've built the machine that can process through the material. And so the biggest opportunity for us is now just figuring out, how do we get more material? How do we fuel the machine, essentially? So
And you mentioned that when COVID hit, you went and got like 30 new sources. Most of those were local, I assume. How do you balance that? Like, you were hungry and you saw your sources disappear. You saw your last books come in the door, and you said, I got to go eat. So I got to go kill something, right? Old, caveman philosophy.
yeah.
You had that fire in your belly for a bit, so to speak. How do you maintain that? Or, like, it sounds like right now you're less focused on acquisition and more focused on cutting costs. So how do you as a business owner kind of balance those two pieces?
Yeah, by no means am I perfect or great at this,
Nonsense. Come on now.
but that being said, uh, for me, now, like, supply is less so much dependent on my desire to get supply, but I've more so built out a funnel to like just more of like a okay. So using your analogy, if I'm a caveman, I've run out of food, I need to go out and kill something. Well, I've moved more to the agricultural era where now I'm saying, okay, we're going to need a constant supply, and we're going to eventually need to expand. How do I build a how do I get an ox to carry a plow and uh, plant for the upcoming season? And like I've really built out systems so that way we continue to get new supply and new sources inbound. And a lot of that is just marketing, right? So it's making sure that going back to the original point that you made, it's like really getting into the mind of the other person, not thinking, oh, dollar signs, but more so, hey, what is that other person, in the case of the mother-in-law, like, what is that other person feeling? What are they thinking? And if they were looking to get rid of their books, how are they going to get rid of it? Are they going to call their local library? Are they going to search on Google? Are they going to call their friend? Are they going to look on Nextdoor? What are they going to do? And I think like the more you cover your bases in all those areas I just mentioned, you're essentially creating a funnel where eventually all roads hopefully lead back to you. And so it's again, it's less so on my desire because like you know me, Caleb, like I'll get really obsessed with one thing for a while and then I'll move on to another thing. But I think it's about creating the systems, or more so like kind of the systems in place. So even if you're not in the mood to go out and source and supply, there's still a regular stream coming in.
Yeah. It's always the balancing act as an owner, as an entrepreneur, to kind of figure that out. I would say everything we're talking about here, I think it also, we haven't even talked about numbers, but if you don't know where your business is at, numbers are really just a scoreboard. And, we always talk about you can't measure what you can't, sorry, you can't manage what you can't measure, or what you
Right.
don't measure. And I've also heard it said that if you're not measuring something, you don't have a business. And that's a little aggressive, I think. I think you can still serve customers and do things, but not knowing where your business is at is a really dangerous spot to be. All right, we got time for a couple more therapy questions, and then we'll take some of your questions as well. Adam E., I see you said you're on the East Coast. You want me to hire you maybe for this job? Reach out to me, caleb@thebookflipper.com. Happy to chat there. Don't want to field that question here necessarily, but caleb@thebookflipper.com. If you're still watching, happy to answer some questions over there. What else you got for me?
All
Mr.
right. Next
Dave?
question. I've got who would your next dream hire be? And I'm not talking
Taylor Swift.
I was going to say Pamela Anderson, which is a little bit more your time.
Good.
What type of task and responsibilities would they have? Like this next dream hire, ideal hire?
Man, well, it's two different things. One would be what's the next best thing that I need in my business, which is probably a little more warehouse help. When you ask dream hire, I haven't done a great job of this. I am not the most detailed person in the world. I would, Adam says me, I would love to have a really good personal assistant, somebody that could help manage my schedule, kind of keep me on task, because I tend to be, I don't know if I'm ADD, but I tend to get distracted and very honed in on certain things. And so having like almost like a business manager could really help. I went to go hire one about almost a year ago, I suppose. And I actually stumbled across John. We need to get him on here one of these days, but he's a good golf buddy. He's an incredible young guy, got a really good sense of curiosity around him. And we were just grabbing coffee one day, and I was like, hey, I'm trying to look for some kind of an assistant, someone to help manage my schedule and run some numbers and kind of keep things going. And he was kind of like, he listened, and we were talking through what might a good opportunity be. He kind of was like, I'm kind of looking for something. I was like, John, you're like, no offense, but like you are incredibly gifted at business as well, which I'd love that. But I'm like, I don't want to use your skill sets to be like, an email responder and everything else. So he ended up running our marketplace program. We brought him in. He's done a number of research tasks for our company, which has been awesome. So my dream position, and if anybody has one, I'd love to pick your brain on it because I don't know where to start really. But some kind of a personal assistant. Probably it could be remote, doesn't have to be local, but somebody who could kind of keep me on task, keep me organized, and kind of help manage the schedule, the emails, the communications, etc., and let me focus on kind of the main tasks that I want to get done. I'm a huge believer in the one thing. We've talked about that book quite a bit in the past, and one of the big things that Gary Keller, the author, talks about is kind of blocking your day off and having half your day, 4 hours, just dedicated to whatever that next thing is. So for us, we're improving the app, we're working on consignment programs. There's always some big things you can do in your business to move the ball forward. It gets really easy just to play defense all the time and answer emails and Instagram messages and everything else. And those are all great things. I love talking to all of you, but they can tend to distract. So for me, it's some kind of an assistant, somebody that, an assistant sounds like such a belittling term, but somebody that can really help play more defense, block and tackle, and keep me on task. And that would really benefit the business as well.
Yeah.
And Diane says, can I find one of those to get me through grad school? Absolutely need a personal assistant. If they could take your test for you, that'd be great.
That would be awesome.
So what are you in the market for, Dave? I know you're always hiring and finding creative ways to find people. What's the next dream job you're looking to hire for?
All right. If anyone is watching this either now or today is June 9th, it's 3:05 p.m. here in Colorado, or next month, I am looking for a marketing associate, someone to help with digital marketing, social media marketing, and just basic graphic design. You don't have to have experience doing Illustrator, but a good eye for graphic design, as well as some basic copywriting ability. That is who I am looking for. And so that would be my dream hire. Yeah, it's 2 for 1. I answered the question, and then I also did a little bit of outreach at the same time.
I love it. Well, hopefully that works for you. This would be a perfect time to say that we're sponsored by like Upwork or one of those job finding sites, but we still don't have sponsors. So if you're watching this video and you'd like to sponsor us, we're cheap. No one's paid us anything yet to sponsor us. In fact, we market other companies through Ardbeg. I've got, my own brand names I'm wearing. So they're not even me. If you guys are watching and have some kind of a service that would appeal to Amazon sellers, hit us up.
Awesome. Yeah. I'd love to be sponsored by either Spring 44 or a Campari. I'd be fine with either of those.
Those would all be great. Beggars can't be choosers.
Exactly. Do you want to move on to questions, or do you want to tackle the last one?
I think we've had the last one was what are some of the challenges in today's hiring market? I think Dave, you've actually mentioned that probably in episode 2 or 3. We kind of got into that.
Yeah.
You want to give just a 30-second overview of some of the challenges? Because I don't hire a ton on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So I think the tough part right now is twofold. Number one, people are looking for more wages, right? And that's something that, dependent on your business, you can either do or can't do. Either you can pay really, really well, or you have to pay right around minimum wage. Number two, people are looking for positions with purpose. And that is 100% within your control as a business owner. And so different ways that you can do that. Number one, make sure you have a clear sense of purpose of what you guys are doing as a business for the overall community and for the world. And so once you define that, then you can expand beyond that to start instilling those I guess, a feeling of purpose and I guess contentment into the employees that you hire. And so the challenges right now, people are asking for more wages. People are looking for meaningful jobs. The nice thing is, if you are able to supply a very meaningful position, meaningful work, you look at a lot of these nonprofits, a lot of them don't pay quite as well as a lot of for-profit companies, but they're able to still retain really high quality talent. Why is that? Because these employees believe in the mission. And so there you go, in 30 seconds, the problem and then the potential solution.
Yeah, culture is really, really big. If you can engender or build that session, build that culture where people want to work there. Now, it doesn't mean you can have great culture and rip people off and not pay them anywhere near what they're worth. But given two options where the pricing is similar, I absolutely think
Have
that's.
you ever have you seen We Crash? This is the second time I talked about this, huh?
No, I've not. It's on my list of things to watch right now.
It is so good. So it goes over the chronicles of WeWork, kind of the start and their rise to Adam Newman, the founder CEO's eventual exit. But they're apparently a company that was notorious for underpaying their staff. But they were kind of like a cult. Like Adam Newman was really influential, and he was just like very charismatic. And a lot of these guys believe in the mission, and now they're worth like 6, 7, $8 billion. And so, yeah.
I need to give it a watch. Anytime I hear, well, it was you both times now, but anytime I hear something multiple times, it's like, all right, I need to definitely move that up the priority list.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, we are going to switch gears here. So, just as a little recap, we talked about the bourbon we're drinking. We talked about a bit of a remote sourcing opportunity involving hiring a moving company. So, again, follow me on Instagram at the Book Flipper. I will be sharing how that works, or maybe doesn't work. It might fall on its face, but that should be getting picked up on Saturday. So, I'm excited to see those books show up, hopefully, in my warehouse next week. So I will share a little bit more of that and see if that's a good strategy and if I should do more of it or if it falls on its face and I should do less of it. And then we did a little bit of a therapy session talking through some of the changes, some of the pivotal moments in our businesses as we got into COVID, as well as what the outlook looks like right now. It's a little bit, we try not to be always pessimistic. We want to be realistic and not just say it's all great or all terrible. It's, we want to give you both sides of it. Right now, inflation is a serious thing. Wages are going up as well, so those things do tend to impact our businesses, and we'll all try and figure out how to be nimble together. So if you have questions, drop those. We'll take just a few minutes at the end and answer those. We don't have a giveaway today. I guess the giveaway is we're giving you our time and our smiles and our attention. So that's cheesy, but it'll work. Adam says, Caleb, give me your contact info. Caleb, CALEB at thebookflipper.com. Caleb at thebookflipper.com. You can find me on YouTube or Instagram as well. It's me. I don't have an assistant yet, as we've established to do that. David took a chance. If you're watching this and have some organization skills and want to put them to work, I would be happy to hire somebody part-time, full-time, whatever that may look like. I've got lots of random projects for you to do. I promise you won't be bored. So yeah, if that fits the bill, if that sounds intriguing, if you don't think you would get bored of me in about 30 seconds, reach out, Caleb at thebookflipper.com. David, let's shift gears as a couple questions come in. Post those. We will answer just a few questions at the end. So as we're going through this last segment, if you would do that. David's segment he wanted to come up with, he called it Game Changers. So David, what is a game changer? It could be a book that you've read. It could be a software that you've been testing out. It could be a new habit that you're testing. It could be a new sleep aid. What's a game changer that you've encountered over the last week that you want to share with everybody here?
Yeah, well, so I'm kind of embarrassed to say it now because I've been doing so well until today, which is I've been trying to cut out drinking during the week. After last week's session, I told you how I got turned on Tuesday, but I'm sure you've experienced this too. But just like abstaining from alcohol throughout the week definitely helps with sleep and productivity during the week. Beyond that, that's kind of like, I mean, it's a good tip, but it's kind of lame. Let's see.
David says be boring and don't drink alcohol. Okay.
Yeah, don't drink alcohol during the week. That's hey, I'm just gonna stick with that. That's what I've got this week.
Great one. I actually went. I'm trying to focus on my health this year, so I'm actually taking like 2% of the income that comes in and applying that toward health. That could be I'm drinking athletic greens in the morning. I bought like a rowing machine, so I'm doing things that are just trying to be focused on health outside of like playing golf. That doesn't quite count. That's mental health. So I went and found there's a not new, but a holistic doctor here in town. He's a chiropractor, but like he's focused on nutrition and some other stuff. And I went and saw him yesterday just for an opening session, and I figured he'd tell me like, stop eating so many carbs and alcohol and whatever else. Well, two things came of it. One, I've had back adjustments before. I've never done what's the one where you get the needles? go to
Is that
acupuncture.
acupuncture?
Yeah, I've never done anything like that. I know our developer is big into dry needling right now. Like, there's a lot of ways you can kind of adjust your body. Have you ever had a cranium adjustment,
Like
like your
brain?
skull?
No skull? No,
Not
never.
the brain. And maybe that's the wrong term. I'm not really familiar with this, but we were kind of doing things, and he was like doing like muscle tests and push on your arm, and then like have you do certain things and look for imbalance. And he kind of looked at me after a bit and goes, "Did you ever have a head injury?" I said, "Well, other than my mom dropping me on my head as a baby." I said, I got in a car bike accident. I was the bicyclist and got hit by a car like 12 years ago. And he's like, interesting. So he did a couple other tests and goes, "Yeah, you've got something blocking like your nervous system somehow." And it's usually when your skull is several different bones and somehow they get off. And so Tony knows what we're talking about here. Craniosacral work feels good. And so he took this little balloon. I guess you have 6 sinus cavities, so it's kind of like a COVID test, but a balloon. Took a little balloon and a hand pump and put it up into my sinus and then expanded the balloon, and it kind of shifted my skull, I guess. And you could hear it crack. It was really uncomfortable, but it felt amazing. So
Really?
I don't know. I've had probably the last 7, 8 years, I just never like chiropractic work's never done it. Massage has never fixed it. My shoulder's been really sore. My whole right side. I tore my ACL in high school or college rather. And I thought that my right knee was off. And so my right hip is always like internally rotated and my shoulder's always just a little off. And I thought that was knee related and it just probably wasn't ever going to go away. And he's like, no, that's probably nervous system related. And so he adjusted my skull, for lack of a better term. I'm sure I'm slaughtering the terms, and I feel really good today. So we'll see. I don't know if it's long-term fix, but if you guys aren't doing chiropractic, if you aren't investing in your health, it's really interesting. So again, we talk about going upstream in the book world, right? How do we go up and get books before they go to Goodwill? I think the same thing's true in health. And I'm really fascinated about like what we're putting in our body, whether it's alcohol or water or the food that we eat. I think those things pay out dividends in terms of the energy, our ability to focus, just so many things that we have as humans. And so, if hopefully this is a major change, but adjusting my noggin might have a
Wait,
really big
Caleb, I'm
impact.
still like stuck on the part where they stuck a balloon. Wait, where did they stick the balloon?
It goes up your nose. So I guess there's
The
6
balloon.
sinus cavities, 3 on each side. And so he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna," he wanted to work on my left side. And so he did one on the right just to like show me what it feel like, and like I heard a small click. And then
Is that
the
fake?
balloon's like this big, like maybe an inch long, and
Dude,
then
I
like
don't
a
know.
hand
My
pump.
nostril isn't even an inch long. It's like, dude,
Well, if you've had COVID tests where they basically go up to the base of your brain, but anyway, it was a crazy feeling. It feels really good. We'll see if it, again, long-term relief, that would be amazing. So I don't know. For me, this has been a year of focusing on my health, trying to focus on a little bit better what I eat, what I drink, and we'll see. So if you guys are looking at health, I'm always curious about different things and do that as well. Lisa says that sounds wild. It definitely was. Okay, we got a few questions here and a couple comments. Someone Googled craniosacral therapy, so thanks, Mike. Um, Jay Patterson says, Caleb, you mentioned a book you've read a few times. It's probably The One Thing, kind of a black and white cover. The One Thing by Gary Keller. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Here's a good question, Dave. Besides Lorenzo, who's the most impressive bookseller you've encountered and why?
it probably has to be myself, but it's funny.
Well, I think Matthew tried to get Lorenzo on the show. Lorenzo, if you're still watching, we'd love to have you on the show someday. You don't have to give away all your secrets, just most of them. Alisa says 10 minutes of yoga in the morning before bed is a game changer. I think for most of us that sit down or are busy in the warehouse, definitely stretching would help quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Someone says we should try acupuncture. So if you guys have any other questions, drop those real quick. Otherwise, we will sign out. Trying to scroll through, make sure I didn't miss any. Here's one. Have you looked at this much, David? I know you're not doing a lot of FBA.
Automatic
What are the
enrollment and
pros?
remote fulfillment. And no, I have not. I've not had experience with that.
So this is a newer thing. We'll have to research this more before I give like an educated opinion. I think this is something that Amazon is turning on by default. So you might want to check the email and maybe turn that off for your account if it is on by default. I think what it is allowing Canada and Mexico to access the U.S. inventory. So if you sell in the U.S., they might be able to get your inventory. I don't know if it's just for FBA or if it's also for merchant fulfilled. FBA has the global export program, and the buyer will pay the shipping, and so it doesn't cost you any extra. And so that's kind of a no-brainer to turn that program on. This one, I believe they allow you to have a premium where you put on your books. So you might say it's 10% more to sell into Mexico. But I'll have to do more research. I'm not going to give an opinion just yet because I don't know the pros and cons there. Gary or Jerry says, "What's the future of book sales in Canada?" So that's a good
Have you had
one.
experience selling in Canada, Caleb?
Other than the global export program, no. We have customers who sell in Canada, so we talk to them and try and understand the market. Have you done it?
Yeah, I've done in the past, and it's really nice. But the biggest issue for us was like we were going with least expensive postage option, shipping method, and the tracking visibility isn't always that great going internationally. And then the second thing is when you send the wrong item, or if the item you sent is damaged, uh, they can't send it back. The only option is just a full refund because the cost to send it back, return it back to you is often cost prohibitive.
Sure.
So
So you
that's
were
the only
selling
reason.
on Amazon.ca,
Yeah, yeah, long time
but
ago.
you were fulfilling out of the US, so shipping across the border. Yeah. So
Exactly.
the costs are higher. The benefit is it's a smaller market. There's probably fewer big players in the market. So if you probably get higher prices on some books, I would imagine there's an arbitrage opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, interesting. Cool. Well, keep experimenting. Guys, thanks for watching. Antiguan Sun says Pallet IQ discount rate. We have a Pallet IQ marketplace program. I don't know what you're talking about. If you want to hit me up for something, Caleb at thebookflipper.com. Happy to answer that. Not quite sure what you're asking. Well, on behalf of Dave and myself and Matthew, he's not here, but he's with us in spirit. Thanks for watching episode 7. We do appreciate your time. And we're going to be on next week. Episode 8 will be with a fella out of Alaska. We'll be sharing how the heck does he stay warm, first of all? And secondly, how does he run an Amazon business from so far away where shipping costs are prohibitive? So we'll be picking his brain. I believe he started with books and he's maybe graduated to some other things, including Turo and some other small business hustles as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Someone we met down in Miami. I don't know if you met him or not there, Dave, but he's a
I did meet him. I don't know if we still have Caleb.
I'm still here, maybe.
All right, cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I did have a chance to meet him.
Sweet. Well, guys, again, thanks for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all those good things. And we'll say one last cheers, and we'll catch you all next week.
All right, cheers, guys. See ya.